Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm Hannah Forrest, a herbalist and naturopath with a deep love for plants, seasons, and the quiet rituals that shape how we live and care for ourselves. This podcast is an invitation to slow down and reconnect with the wisdom of the natural world through herbal medicine, folklore, seasonal living, ritual, astrology, and simple earth-honoring practices that can be gently folded into everyday life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and record, the Witchery people. I honour their enduring connection to the lands, waters, and communities, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Always for the New Age podcast. My name is Hannah, I'm your host, and today we have another incredible returning guest. I always say it's so nice when they like us enough to come back a second time. So a big welcome to Jenn Campus. Jenn is a mythologist, an anthropologist, a two-time best-selling author, and a mother of two living in Sardinia. Jenn translates the unspoken words of the unseen world into stories that captivate our imagination and stir us to come into right relationship with the world and all of its inhabitants. She distills down esoteric experiences to create various practical frameworks that inspire you to create your own simple daily rituals, traditions, and legacies that you can apply to become re-enchanted with the world around you. So thank you so much for coming back, Jenn.
Thanks for having me. That was a mouthful.
But you do so many incredible things, and there's so many things I could have put in there, like you're a former homesteader and you're about to run your first retreat, and there's so many cool things that you're doing. You're a podcast host of the Old Ways for Modern Days podcast, which I feel like is kind of kindred. So I just love everything that you do, and I'm really excited that you've come to talk to us today because we're talking a little bit about your new book. But for those people who maybe haven't listened to our first episode together, and I'll put it in the show notes for everyone who hasn't listened to it yet, could you share a little bit about who you are and kind of how you came to walk the old ways?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenn, and I live on the beautiful island of Sardinia. My husband's family, well, he's also from Sardinia, but my husband's family is from here. And we moved here about 5 years ago, basically to raise our children here. So it's a really culturally solid land. There's still a lot of old traditions that are here, lots of megalithic sites, over 10,000 of them. And so it just feels like, not only because there's roots here, but because it just feels like a very inspiring place for the kind of work that I do, and just a really great place to raise our kids. So that's a little bit about, where I'm sitting in this moment. It's morning here, so I'm getting the morning light. It's still a little bit dark, so hopefully I'll start to look a little less in the shadows. But yeah, I mean, I usually just describe myself as a writer first and foremost, just because that's sort of the way that I operate in the world, not just because I write books, but it's just the way, the language that I have always felt the most comfortable being in. And I write about mythology and folklore and seasonal celebrations and ancestral wisdom. It really kind of started as a way for me to connect to my own past and my own history. But then I also felt like it resonated with a lot of people who have the same ache, that feeling of maybe disconnection, cultural loss, and longing to remember who we are and where we came from. And so I feel like I'm just a person who is living her life and trying to connect more to those things and share what I've learned along the way in case it helps anybody else along their journeys, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you do put so much good information, wisdom, knowledge, and experience out into the world for people who really are looking for that and seeking that. Especially in regards to that cultural loss, I think is
Yeah.
such a big piece, and even skill set loss. Like you do a lot of really great
Yes.
work about reclaiming those things. So you have courses and there's so many ways people can engage with what you offer. But I think that that was one big thing that came for me out of our last discussion was just how comforting that was to
Mhm.
hear you speak about those topics.
Yes.
Because I also think a lot of people talk about everyone's selling you something, right? Like everybody's selling you something on the internet and everybody feels like they're an expert. But not
Mm.
only do you have the personal experience on a deep level to be able to speak to what you're speaking to, but also you have qualifications. You are a qualified anthropologist. You have a lot of knowledge and understanding on these topics. And so you're not here to just sell something to people. You're really here to help people on their
Yeah.
path, on their journey, to feel more connected with their ancestors and with the world around them.
Yes.
Um,
Because I
mm,
think it has brought so much to me, so much more understanding, so much more feeling of belonging, and maybe understanding a minute bit of, my place on the great web of life. I mean, I think
mhm,
that's like a lifelong journey that maybe we don't even fully understand in our one
mhm,
lifetime that we have, um, in this moment. But it just, I know how it's helped me. And I always feel like if you have something, and this goes for anyone, if you have something to share that has profoundly changed the quality of your life, the understanding of your life, you should share it with others, because if you're feeling that way, other people are feeling that way.
Absolutely. It's definitely a beautiful way to reconnect the thread between us all
Mhm.
when everybody feels so isolated.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And
Yeah.
so, as I've kind of touched on in your intro, since we last spoke, you've written and released an entire book. So, congratulations.
Thank
It's called
you.
Witches Brews, and I had the
Yes.
absolute great fortune of being able to read it and check it over for you and have a little sneak peek before it was
Thank
released so I can write
you.
you a testimonial. And it's honestly stunning. I love every part of it. I got so excited reading it. And I know that everybody is going to love it as well who listens to this podcast. So, could you tell us about what inspired Witches Brews?
Yes, and I just really want to thank you again for taking the time to read it and to write the testimonial. It really meant a lot for me, coming from your huge background in herbalism and your just love of the plants, like your own knowledge and wisdom and all of that. Just I think having that testimonial was like, yay! So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was an
um,
absolute joy.
but yeah, I think really the book just came out of years of just falling in love with plants, which I think is something that probably a lot of listeners can relate to.
hmm
Not just because, they have healing or magical powers, but because they just have such a presence and there's a companionship, because we evolved together. And
hmm
so I just started to notice that a lot of the plants that I read about and things in folklore, um, especially once I moved to Sardinia, were like right outside my front door. And so it was kind of like meeting these characters from stories and books that I have always been so fascinated with, and then getting to see them growing just randomly outside, on my walks and stuff. It was like meeting a celebrity or something.
That is exactly how I felt going to Canada and seeing them growing there. Like it was
Yes,
honestly like a massive fangirl moment for
totally.
me.
Yes, it's like having a crushes, on
Yeah,
these plants, and just
totally.
getting so excited and wanting to get to know them better, kind of just
Yeah.
as their own non-human people.
hmm
And I felt like they were inviting me and, asking me to also be remembered for this relationship that humans have always had with plants. And I felt like everybody has this. I'm experiencing this. So everybody has the potential to experience this too. It's like something that
hmm
we have just had a little bit of a collective amnesia about.
hmm
But it's like it is in our bodies and in our bones, that memory. And so this book was just sort of a way that I wanted to help people remember, and
Mm-hmm.
to also remember that it's not because I'm just telling them a lot about plants in the book, but that it sort of wakes up something inside of them, something that we all have. And it's like sort of a way of weaving back memory, in ways that are like very, very accessible through, kitchen magic, recipes, just making it more about that, reclaiming the memories and the understanding that lives within us. We just have to wake it up.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge because that cultural disconnection, I mean, every traditional culture, I'm going to say every traditional culture understood plants, animals,
Yeah,
rocks, stones, trees as like other than human kin, right? More than
exactly.
human kin, however you want to say that. Um, but we had relationship with them on a way that was deeper than just something we can use or a tool or as a resource. It was this living connection and understanding that we are all related, and we lost that along the way. And the plants very much, I think, when we think about herbs are one of those like portals, those gateways for people to really start to understand that reconnection, because I think it's the plants, like herbs, speak so strongly to us, and I think that we, especially flowers, have such a potent medicine to them,
Mm,
on an energetic level, and it connects with people and touches people in a way that maybe looking at a stone doesn't always. Like sometimes that takes some meditation or it's some real mindfulness and maybe already being on that path to understand that connection with, say, a rock. But
yeah.
people touch a flower, they smell a rose and they feel something, especially
Hmm.
roses. That's a big one for people, is it
Totally.
reminds them of their families, and
Hmm.
connection with loved ones a lot of the time, especially
Yes.
with grandmothers and the matriarchal line. So I think, yeah, that's incredibly potent and definitely very relevant to today's society and where we're kind of all at. And definitely collective amnesia is the perfect way to explain it.
Yeah.
And now we have people like you who are starting to reopen that conversation for people. And what I love about Witches Brews is, and the way that you work, is it's not just all hypothetical. You really give people very clear ways to start to engage with these practices in their homes, because I think that's something when I started out on my witchcraft journey, my paganism journey, I was 15 and I
Yeah.
didn't know, like I had no one in my life. I saw a bumper sticker on the back of someone's car that said something about like, ask me, I'm pagan. And I went, what's that? And I went home to our very basic internet and Googled it, and then borrowed all the books out of the library on witchcraft and Wicca, and because
Yeah.
that's what there was mostly books about at the time,
Mm,
and started learning. But I didn't have, a lot of them were kind of spells that weren't very practical, and they were kind of just
right.
like a love spell and,
Yes.
collect your pink, love heart shaped confetti, whatever it is. And it wasn't things that you can kind of bring into your home and really integrate in this living prayer kind of movement
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
practice. And that's obviously the way that I really like to work in my own life. Um, and so this is perfect for people who are interested in that. So could you tell us about kind of what you feel the heart of this book is? Like, what are people going to find in the book? What
Yeah.
is it trying to tell people?
I hope it's reconnection, that word
Mhm.
that you used. I think reconnection with plants, yes, but also those parts of ourselves that have been dormant. Um, and if you think about it, it is kind of like nature and plants too. Like, not plants are not, they don't have a continual growing cycle, right? There's a
Mhm.
dormancy period, there's like a seed period, a dormancy period, and then they sort of, blossom when the time and conditions are right. And so in that way, I feel like the book is a way to maybe, sprinkle a little water and sunshine on the dormant places that sort of hope to wake things up and to stir, um, some healing into this cultural loss and disconnection, that we've had. But it's also like a way to just fall in love with your home and your kitchen again,
Mhm.
because it's, your home and your kitchen is like a place where the life of your family lives, no matter how big your family is, whether it's you and your cats or, you know, a fish, or, you know, you've got lots of kids running around. It's just like, it is the place, it's your sanctuary. And I really want people to understand that and remember and treat the home as sort of like its own living being, its own spirit and sense of place that we can also communicate with and be a part of. So it's sort of, yeah, it's always hard when I try to explain things about how I write things or whatever, because it's just so all encompassing that it's not based on like one these little pinpoints, but it's more of a way to like, how do we what is the weave of all the pinpoints together. So yeah, it's kind of a devotional to the old ways of tending, to all the different things, ourselves, our family, the land, and most importantly, maybe the lineage of women who came before us and carried this knowledge, who were silenced. And there's a real calling, I think, from many places for that to come back to us.
And it's so interesting, the concept of the hearth, because I was aware, I know the definition of the term, right? And that's definitely a term that you use throughout the book. It is a focus of the book is tending to the hearthkeeper, explaining who that is, the traditions and the folklore around that, the historical significance of that, how it showed up throughout different cultures. And I think that's one of not only the skill set losses, but that really that a massive point of disconnection for people. And really, I mean, it gets a little bit political, but the role of women in the home and the significance of the home, as a place of sanctuary and a connection for family. Because how many people, it breaks my heart, but there's so many people out there in the world who go, if I could just get everything I need, every nutrient I need in one tablet a day, I'd never eat again. And like, I see that as a naturopath speaking with people, I guess, about their diet. But like, honestly, the amount of people who say that, and every time it lights this fire in me, because, I, to an extent, probably was that I had, complicated relationship with food when I was younger. And it took a really good nutritional lecturer in uni to really help me understand that food has a place in our bodies as a source of nourishment, and then years of practice and connecting with my spiritual path to understand that it also has a place in your soul and in your presence with you, people around you. And so, and then understanding our history, bringing people away from their homes and disconnection between communities is a really great way to control people. And that makes me so sad that, so many of us don't understand how crucial it is to be connected with that center of our home, to have a place that feels genuinely safe, because so many of us don't feel safe in today's climate. It's not a very safe space to be in the world at the moment. But, working to reconnect with the hearth and understand how that plays a role in your dynamic, no matter, as you said, whether it's you and your cats or you and a goldfish or you and a big family or a little family or a single parent family, to be able to understand the role that plays and how it can heal parts of your lineage, right? And also, heal things for future generations. That's so important, such important work. So is there, I think, let's talk about hearthcraft, because we're on that topic. So kind of, how would you describe the role of the hearth in spiritual practice, and what does it mean to be a hearthkeeper in the modern world? And also, just to throw it in there, how does one find the hearth of their home? Because you and I know that, but
Okay.
it's a lot of questions. Just let's talk about the hearth.
Let's talk about the hearth. Yeah, I mean, the hearth is really the heart of the home, I would say. It doesn't have to necessarily be a fireplace or a kitchen as more traditionally thought. I mean, it could be, and it often is, because that is, something that has a long history. But it's really the place where people gather, where you feel like is the center of your home. It's the place, that brings a sense of calm and peace and where people just tend to show up and gather. In my house, a lot of times that it used to be the kitchen when I had like an open kitchen where people could just easily come into. Now I don't really have an open kitchen. I have a very small kitchen, and I usually shut the door because I don't want the cats coming in and bugging me while I'm trying to cook. So it's more, the sort of the shared living room space that we have. But to your question of what a hearthkeeper is and what it means, is sort of the person who, or people who are taking responsibility for the atmosphere and the environment of the home. So not in sort of like this, Instagrammable aesthetic way, but more like, how are we protecting this space energetically? How are we feeding each other? How are we marking time and honoring the thresholds and the seasons and taking care of our, ancestral legacy? But it's also in the practical. So that's sort of like the more spiritual, esoteric side of it. But it's also like, when we're stirring a pot of soup, we can whisper a blessing in there, or we can light a candle to mark the end of a day, or choose music that, the feelings of the family or you need in that moment to sort of like shift the energy of a space. So it's the person who is very attuned to the energies of a space, but that also have the skill set and understanding of how to harmonize all of that as well. Because if we don't have our energetic harmony in the place where we live, you can have all kinds of practical problems like plumbing problems and, people getting sick often and all these different things. And that is usually a sign that, there's something that needs to be tended to in that space. So the hearthkeeper is like really vital to the health of the home, basically, and all of the people who are living in that space.
Yeah. And I like that you mentioned that it could be people as well. I've never really thought about it that way, but I guess if your family is really in tune with each other, there might be a bit of a collaborative experience. But I know that you've got a chapter about keys and understanding, like,
Yes.
the matriarch of the family and holding a key. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, that also just comes from a lot of mythology where, either goddesses or, stories of cultures. Like I'm thinking about like Norse culture, especially Old Norse culture, where, you have all these images of women with a key on their belt. We see this also in medieval paintings and things like that. And it's sort of like shows that it's a symbol of sort of that role within the family of having access to all of the things, because the key unlocks all the doors. So it unlocks, the storage to the food. It unlocks, a lot of people had either like treasure boxes or rooms that had all of their, most prized possessions, their wealth, so to speak, and that the woman had the key to that. So that really shows that in some more ancient cultures, that women had a much more important role, and that being a home tender or like a house wife basically was actually a huge responsibility. And there was a lot of trust placed in that person, because they literally had access to all of the resources that the house had and was in control of how all those resources were used and disseminated and all of those things. So we sort of think now, oh, the housewife, it's like, oh, it's sort of like this really oppressed, sad, like figure who, oh, woe is me. Like I'm have to do all these domestic things and I have all these like chores that I have to do and all these things. But it's really a privilege if you look at it in one way. I mean, yes, I'm not discounting all of the horrible history that is involved in that too, but I'm all about how do we acknowledge the horrible histories but also like reclaim this for ourselves in our
Mhm.
modern times. Okay, so I'm talking about, yes, there is a lot of bad stuff that happened with true oppression of women and women's roles becoming basically this indentured slavery in a way. But now it's like, how do we reclaim that and say our ancestors, a lot of them couldn't even dream of the homes that we have.
Yeah.
You know, they couldn't even dream of having that kitchen that you have, or the house,
Mhm.
or the land that you have
Mhm.
available to you. And so, how do we honor their sacrifices and their longings and their dreams by truly being grateful for what we do have, and, you know, engaging with that in a way that feels empowering and good to us. You know,
Mhm.
I never feel better than when I've made something in the kitchen for my family and they all sit down at the table and they're like, "Oh my god, this is so good. I love this so much." And I know it's something really healthy and nourishing. I'm like, I'm here for this. You
Yeah.
know, this is a privilege to be able to do this, because,
Mhm.
you know, many of us come from, you know, families and histories where people didn't have enough to eat. They didn't have a home. They were on the run, or, you know, they were too poor to own anything outright of their own. So it's a lot. It's a lot
Mm.
altogether.
Yeah, I think this whole concept is very nuanced and very intricate. There's a lot of
Yeah.
history across every continent, really. The role of women and the role of the hearth and these places in the home and in communities. Because I think that's the thing too, is it's not just in each individual home. This was like a network within communities of each hearthkeeper as well, and people supported
Hmm.
each other. And it wasn't like, I've seen people talking about how reclaiming these practices, I suppose, like reclaiming, it's kind of like the homesteading culture. You know, they make the sourdough and they tend to the animals, but they're doing it alone. And that's probably another piece of the puzzle that can come once we have started to reclaim and, find ways for this to work in our modern lives, that we can then begin to introduce that community aspect as well, um, because that
Yeah.
I think was big too. Yeah. And so thank you for explaining that. I think that
Yeah.
that's going to add a lot of clarity for people who maybe don't know about the hearth and haven't
Hmm.
delved into this before. And again, it can be anywhere in your home, but I understood it the same way you just explained it, that it's kind of the place that everyone gravitates to.
Yeah.
So if you find a spot in the home where everyone congregates, whether it's a
Hmm.
kitchen island or a TV unit or the fireplace or whatever it is, like, it's that spot where everybody congregates, comes together, they're drawn to it, it's magnetic, um,
Hmm.
for the home. So now everybody's going to be silently thinking to themselves, what is that in my home?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so let's talk about, is there a brew, recipe, or chapter that feels particularly alive for you right now?
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, yes, it's probably not going to feel for you because you're in Australia right now and it's hot and summer. But right now, I'm just thinking about the chapter on broth,
Oh,
because,
yeah.
you know,
I think that's timeless. I think that's
yeah, it's
timeless.
true too. I mean, I think too, we can use broth all year round, and it's
Mhm.
such a great resource to sort of distill down um, kind of seemingly useless materials into something that's like really nutritious and can be the base for a lot of things, which
Mhm.
is what I love about it, because I feel like it really does represent sort of the whole theme of this book, which is just, you know, finding that chapter is called like the cauldron of abundance, because the
I
way
love
that I look at
that.
abundance is not sort of like in the way where it's like, oh, it's all about wealth, but for me it's about really looking around where you are and seeing all the things that you already have, and finding ways to really utilize it and use it to its fullest potential. And that is really, to me, the true meaning of abundance is like being able to look at what you already have, especially in those moments when you feel like you don't have enough, to sort of like scrape all of the metaphysical jars of sauces and mix it all together and create something out of nothing. I mean, to me, that is like the true kitchen magic, if there ever was. And then it's not like then you're done. This is just also like a foundational piece that then you can add so many other ingredients to make something even more elevated. So to me, I love making broth. I love talking about it and just using it. It's so versatile and just such a wonderful thing. And there's just so much, I think, magic truly in it. It's like really this alchemy of changing these sort of things that you would normally throw away into something beautiful.
I was absolutely going to say it is such an alchemical process. And that's the kitchen in general, isn't it? Because we are transforming materials into something, a source of nourishment for ourselves and our families, and a source of magic as well, if that's the way that you practice. So, yeah, I think a lot of people love broths, and they're definitely having their time. And the way that you integrate them into your book, it's another level of broth to it. It's not just like a standard bone broth with some veggies. Like, you can add herbs and spices and really make this a magical process. And it's something that some people might be doing anyway for their health, and then you can actually add to that as a part of your spiritual practice, which is awesome.
Definitely, because each ingredient that you add into it brings its own energy, its own spirit, and its own lessons and medicines. So it's like it's like a whole practice within itself to make broth. If you really sit with each ingredient that you're choosing, whether it's like, this is the ingredient I'm choosing because this is what I have, or this is the ingredient I'm choosing because I want to put like a specific intention that this holds into this broth. But if you just take the time to sit with each individual thing, to understand its history, where it comes from, what are its properties, both, magically and supportive to the body, that is so much right there that you feel like the plants are teaching you, or, whatever the ingredients are that you're putting into them, because they all have their story. And that's, to me, just endlessly fascinating.
And I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like you've also got in there one of my favorite things, which is stirring directionally. Did you mention that in the book? Yeah. And so that's another layer you can add to any brew, but like, broths in particular, you can definitely do that. Jostle or Widdershins, depending on, or however you say that, in your cultural experience or in your spiritual practice. But basically clockwise or anti-clockwise to pull in something or banish something, release something. And then, as part of being a hearthkeeper as well, being able to set a space before you even start, put a blessing over the ingredients before you get started. Being able to light a candle, set an intention, clear the space before you begin. Even you could go as far as like cleansing your vessels before you store your broths and stocks. Like, there's so many ways you can work with this to layer it and to feed your family in more ways than one. So that is really exciting to me.
Because it's something that we're already doing. So we're already cooking, and so it's not really adding anything more that takes like so much more time. And oh my gosh, I don't have time for this, because nobody has time for anything these days. It's just these simple little things that you can start layering in one by one, seeing if it works for you. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. You don't have to do just one thing. And in the book, I try to offer ways to start for people who are just like, I want to do this, but I don't even know like what I would say as a blessing to my food. Like, what would I say? So I give ways to start that, but always with the caveat that, this is just one way. and there's no wrong way. You just have to find your own way. Um, and in fact, like that is, I say this over and over in the book and in all of the work that I do is like, don't listen to me because it's in a book, you know, sit with it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, let it go. You know, this is not a
Yeah.
Bible. It's just suggestions to try to get people started on their own path and finding their own way.
And I guess this is kind of an interesting topic, and we haven't actually ever spoken about this before in this context, I don't think. But um, what's relevant about that is that we also live in in a society now where people have partnerships of different cultures and different cultural experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
for my husband and I, he has French descent. He's of French descent, and I am definitely very Irish English, and so. Like, and he's from North America. He was born in North America, and I was born in Australia. So neither of us were born in our ancestral lands, and so we have like this grouping of cultural experiences and heritages that mean that what works for us is going to be very different to maybe even what my Irish ancestors did. And it's not to say what you do that any of those are wrong, but it's also so important to honor and acknowledge all the parts of you if they feel good for you, if they feel aligned and they feel healthy for you, to acknowledge those. And so building your own, creating your own practice that is exactly yours and makes sense and feels good for you is key for a good practice, I think.
Absolutely, because you're not going to stick with anything that feels like you're just saying words or taking actions that don't really have personal meaning for you. You know, it's like anything you read or anything you hear people talking about, even what you hear us talking about right now, it's like you take that as a sort of launching off place to find your own way, because I think that's the most important thing too. I think a lot of people have lost touch with their intuition and their own instinct, and that is definitely that was definitely programmed, over many years of our historical issues, of which there are many, to cut us off from our own trust in ourselves, in our bodies, in our own individual sovereignty, so to speak. And that's very important. Like we need that a lot. We need to trust ourselves and trust what our body is telling us, because we may not know why. We may not know why, for example, like you get up in the morning and you're supposed to go somewhere and you get sick and you're like, oh, my whole thing is ruined, but you don't know what was going to happen if you went out into that world. And it's not important to know that. What's important is to trust your body's signals telling you, nope, you're staying in bed today. And just to trust that.
That self-trust piece is huge. And there's very few people in my life that I know that have that locked down now. Like, people are still figuring that out. And I mean, we've all had that moment where we get a little nudge from the universe, or whoever you want to call it, spirit, and we don't listen, and bad things happen, and we go, that was why. So you don't want to find out why, because if you find out why, it's because you didn't listen. Like my finger in the blender, I didn't listen, and I kept going, no, I've got to do that thing, and I'd forget, and I'd go do something else, and then I go, no, I got to do that, I got to make that oil, and then I would get called away on something else, and I go, no, I have to do it. And I did it, and it was a bad choice. So I just think listening to that little nudge, those little nudges that you get, and I think understanding when it's, a little message from the universe, that, divine guidance, it kind of just feels like that. Like it can be as simple as just forgetting something over and over. Like maybe it wasn't meant for you. Or saying yes and then instantly getting that pit in your stomach. It's okay to say, actually, I changed my mind. Or, like, just because I think we're raised in a society now where consistency and dedication is prioritized. And so if we commit to something, we're expected to follow through, but actually it doesn't always serve your highest good to do that. And it doesn't mean to be rude to people, but it just means to be like in tune so that you're able to make those decisions quickly, early, and understand it fully. And then on the the talk about kind of what makes sense for our ancestors as well, I just wanted to say for people as well, and you will understand this with your background very, you'll understand it very deeply, but um, the practices too were so, and this was in touch with that, like inner authority, I guess. It's the whole principle and like I guess the underpinning of folk traditions is everybody did what made sense for them and their community, and this was different from town to town. Like it was so micro, I don't know how to explain that, but so on a micro level, and we see this still with dialect, right? Like there can be from village to village, there can be total differences in dialect, and it's basically slang. But that's because everybody is so in their own niche, and everybody has their own traditions, and that is a beautiful thing. And that's kind of, it was important that we all evolved that way, and it served us well because we understood when things grew and we're ready to harvest in our specific area, what traditions made sense for our families, in our climate, in our environment, with our, councils and with our communities. So being able to understand that that's actually a really important part of folk practices, is being able to understand what makes sense for you and your community on that micro level, and trusting that.
Yeah, trusting that for sure. I mean, it's very like I still see it pretty much often in my daily life, living in Italy, is just how different all the regions are, and even town to town. Like in my own town of 2,000 people, there are two different dialects that are spoken depending on, like, there's this line that runs through the town, and on this side they speak this dialect and on this side they speak, I mean, it's literally that
Wow.
micro regional.
Yeah.
And just I live on this island. It's not very big, but you go to the south and the foods are different, the dialect is way different, and everything, the traditions are slightly different. So it's really, really interesting, and so true what you're saying about that. And I think that's something that we should understand too, is that although our ancestors had their specific traditions, like we are now the living representation of our lineages. So we don't have to be we can take our inspiration, and I think we should absolutely stay true to the heart of our lineages and our ancestral teachings. And at the same time, it's of course expected that they're going to change, because our things are not stagnant. There's not like the stagnant history that we go back to and recreate, because our ancestors wouldn't have done that either. Like if they had lived, if they had been immortal, for example, they wouldn't be doing the same things that they were doing, 2,000, 3,000 years ago today in this age. And so I think that's part of it too, is just understanding that things do evolve and change, but we can still stay true to the spirit and to the heart of those traditions and still honor them with integrity, without trying to like absolutely recreate them, especially for people like us who grew up in a place that is not our ancestral homeland. It's really hard for us to try to recreate those traditions because we don't live in the same environment. We don't have the same geography. We're not maybe even around the same plants. So it's sort of
The same
like,
elders. We don't have elders who can explain those
no,
processes to us. We're trying to learn from books.
Yeah.
And this isn't to say for people to go out and culturally appropriate either.
No.
There's a line to walk between cultural appropriation and then appreciation. I've heard it kind of spoken about in that context, but we're more referring to the practice of understanding your heritage, understanding your ancestral traditions, but then building on them in the modern life, in the life we live now, with
Right.
the resources we have available in the place that we live, and drawing inspiration in that way rather than taking from another culture altogether because it sounds good. There's a difference between that. And so, let's talk about the hearth again. We go dive back a little bit because I'd like to talk about ways that people could start to kind of reclaim the hearth as this place of magic and connection in really practical ways. And some of this is also working with kind of wights and spirits of place, which we talked about in the first episode we did together. And I remember saying we need to cover this more in depth because this is so good. So let's talk about kind of some of the really practical, because that's what you're so great at, practical, tangible ways that people can start to kind of bring this into their home, and things maybe that they'll find more in depth in the book.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is literally to keep it really small, very small acts of attention and intention. So, like I said before, that could be sitting with your ingredients before you cook and just trying to understand, like, what is this plant? What are the properties of this plant? Like, what is it giving to me beyond nourishment? Is there like something about it? What do I feel about it when I touch it, when I taste it? What kind of emotions and feelings does it bring up for me? And I have actually a full like ritual for that in the book about how to discover your plant allies, which is actually super simple. And just, it's just really like attuning into the plants that you already work with and that because you already know them and you're already working with them, you already have a relationship with them, even if you're not completely cognizant of that. So it's about how to deepen into that. That's one great way. I also am a big proponent of doing offerings. I think offerings are a beautiful way to connect with things. So you could do like an offering too, and we'll get into this probably after this, is like connecting, with your house spirit and the spirit of your hearth or the spirit of your land. And just, making an intention for why you're, for example, making a pot of soup. Is it because someone is sick? Is it because it's cold outside? Is it because, and just, putting that love, because it sounds very cliche, but it's actually so real, is like when you cook with love, people can taste that difference and they can feel that. And I think maybe the most important part about that and how to do this is just remembering that we're not alone in this. Like, we're not living in bubbles. We are like intricately weaved into a sentient, intelligent world that is surrounded by other living beings, whether we see them or we don't see them. And what we do in the hearth and what we do in the home, because it is the center point of ancestral knowledge, is like where all of that comes together. So it's kind of like where we take what we've learned from the larger world and all of our experiences outside and everything we've read and everywhere we've traveled and all the things people we've talked to, and then we kind of bring it back in to the central hearth, and it's where we coalesce all of those things. So it's not, reclaiming the hearth is maybe not as superficial as it could sound sometimes. It's not about like beautifying your space and all the aesthetic things, although that can absolutely be part of it if that's what you love, because why not? But, it's for ourselves, for our families, for our lineages. It's just a place where old patterns can be recognized and sort of start to soften, where you can tend relationships, and where something new, but like we were talking about before, rooted in something older, can take place. So it's just really, in a way, your laboratory for ancestral connection to the land, connection to yourself and to other people, is through these simple acts that we do of acknowledging the other beings and presences in our world and in our lives and in our homes.
Yeah, and I think it's like aesthetic is great, and there's some people on Instagram I follow that have like in beautiful setups and altars, and you probably know Mother Hestia. She's one that I absolutely, I'm like, oh, the corn,
amazing,
and so good.
so beautiful.
And I really would love to get her book as well. But I think it's more of an energy body, and I think that everybody knows what it feels like to walk into someone's house and have it feel like a home, and it has really very little to do with what's around them, although to an extent it does have to do with that. But You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about aesthetic. It's about the energy that you feel when you walk into a place. And growing up, people always said that about my mom's house, that, you know, it feels like a home, it feels comfy, it feels cozy, it feels like a place that they feel comfortable and they can kind of relax into. And I've had people say that about mine, which is like the greatest compliment anyone could ever give me.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you can taste the difference when you have a home cooked meal that's been cooked with love.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think we could definitely also look at taking these practices out into other people's homes too, to spread that love and spread that, I guess, the joy and in the joy of these traditions, and opening
Mm-hmm.
conversations for people. Because, you know, if I come to visit you, there's a very good chance if I stay with you that I'm cooking in your home, or if I'm not staying with you that I bring food. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that's just something I like to do for people, because especially with this kind of time of disconnection, you know, we have a friend, and we stay with him when we go back to Canada, and I know that he hasn't had a home cooked meal in a good while. It's
Right.
definitely not anything other than from himself. And so, you know, that is a way that we give to each other and remain, you know, connected with each other, and it keeps that thread alive, as I said earlier. And you can just taste it. You can taste it, you can feel it, and it fills people up in a way that isn't physical.
Yeah.
It fills that hole that, you know, this disconnection leaves us with. And it's that difference between going into a social situation and feeling so drained, and then coming into a social situation and leaving feeling like, oh my God, I just had the best night ever. Like, and as an introvert, I
Mm-hmm.
really am so sensitive to that. And I've always
Definitely.
looked at my home, and Hearth witchery totally resonates with me. That's definitely my practice. Um, you know, I've always been really strict about my home being my sanctuary, and how even before I knew what hearth witchery was, or, you know, hearthcraft was, that, you know, I didn't like when certain people came into my home. I like to kind of have a say in who was invited into my home, because this is a space that I am protecting, and I am cultivating the energy of, and I'm connecting with the spirit of. And, you know, that's really important to me, that again, when people are invited in, that it feels safe, and my family feels safe, and I feel like I can decompress from the world around me by just walking into my home. Because that is like, you know, you can do all the spells you want, but ultimately it's that living prayer, living devotional activity that means that you don't even really need to do a lot when you walk into your home. It's already there. You set the foundation, and you have worked with that spirit of the home to create this aliveness, and kind of tune in your home and yourself to that same frequency. So, you know, it's, everybody knows that feeling. You can definitely think back to a time when you've walked into someone's house, or the opposite, where
Oh,
you've
yeah.
walked in and it's
That's
felt
true.
like sterile.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even if it's chaotic, and even if there's cute things around, you can feel that it's like not settled.
Yeah.
And like, we're intuitive beings inherently, and so, like, you know, I invite people to definitely take that moment to think about those times where you've walked into different people's places, or even your own, and how that felt. So,
Definitely. Very
um
important.
yeah, for sure. And so let's talk about the spirits of place, because this is something, again, we touched on in the first episode. I love this topic. I think it's something that I definitely don't work enough on, with the
Mm-hmm.
spirits
Mm-hmm.
of place, and it's a gap in my practice that I think I could really hone in. So could you talk us a little bit through kind of what they are? You've got a big chapter on the book in this, or, you know, a chapter, and kind of like, how would you describe them, and how would you work with them, yeah, in different ways?
Okay. Yeah, spirits of the place. I mean, they are our partners and our collaborators in creating the sanctuary of the home, because there are, and it's, you could look at it as two different levels in a way. It's kind of how I look at it in a way, is like you have the spirit of the land that you're on,
Mhm.
the land underneath your home or whatever it is. And then you have like the actual, you have the spirit of that's of the inside of your house. And like, I think most cultures have a name for this thing. It's like a brownie, or it's a Tomten, or a Nise, or there's all kinds of names, and people know about them. So
Mhm.
that's sort of like the beings that are like in your house, and sort of in the way that we were just talking about the energy of the house and how you can feel different energies. that is sort of like the homeostasis of those energies that you feel in the house, is like what is actually happening energetically with the spirits of place. And then on top of it, you have all the human parts and pieces that we're doing that we make a place feel more cozy or more comfortable. But the underlying energy is like the energy that's already there. And it's sort of like, how do you work with that in a reciprocal way? And the first thing absolutely that you need to do is acknowledge that this is happening. By my favorite way, of course, as I mentioned, is by doing offerings. And that's a very tangible way to introduce yourself, by saying, I'm giving you this gift to acknowledge that I understand that you are here and that you are also a huge part of this place. And even furthermore, that, I want to work together to make this like a sanctuary for all of us, for all the living beings that are here. And, there's sometimes that's really possible, and sometimes it's really hard. The homestead that we had in Vermont, for example, there was like a spring that ran through the land, and it ran under the house. And the spirit of place was not happy that a house had been built there. It just was not happy about that. And there was very little we could do to change its mind. So we had a lot of water problems in that house, lots of flooding, lots of plumbing issues. I mean, refrigerators leaking all the time, like just water, 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 because that place was meant to be water. Now, we didn't build the house there. So, but we did live there. And so we were always trying to like mitigate this by, for example, we were redoing a room and we were painting the walls, and it was like, okay, underneath, let's use the primer to create like wave shapes, just to sort of acknowledge that this is supposed to be water. It's not, but can we move the energy in a water-like way? It seemed to help somewhat, but I really truly believe that that place and the spirit of that place really just did not want human inhabitants to be there. It was blocking the flow of the spring. So there's situations like that. Another example is like when we moved here, this place that we live now, our home here in Sardinia, this land that we bought about 2 years ago, was completely abandoned. It used to be a vineyard, and it was abandoned for like over a decade. And so all the places where the vineyard used to be was completely, covered over into different shrubs, small trees, plants, just tons of brambles. And we just kind of sat with it for over a year and noticed that there was, all the different animals, lots of foxes, lots of tortoises, lots of different things. And so we just wanted the land to get used to the fact that now humans were going to be living here. So we didn't do anything to alter the land at all until very recently. So it's like almost 2 years into living here, just to get the land used to the idea that we're here now, and, let's start understanding how we can work together to make this place still nice for everybody that's here, and just working together like that. So I think acknowledgement goes a really, really big way. And it's because that's another part of sort of the fundamental things that our ancestors knew that we've had this collective amnesia about, right? Is that we don't understand that anymore. So I think to start, you just imagine your home or the land that you live on as having its own beingness, its own spirit. And it's not just some backdrop to your life. It's not just scenery, but it is an active participant, and that you show respect by heartfelt wanting to build a relationship that is reciprocal, and it will respond. It will definitely respond to that.
Yeah, I think I've only just realized as you've been talking, kind of how I conceptualize that. I'm a very, very visual person. And sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
don't realize kind of the way that I picture things until someone's talking about something and they go, oh, I actually have a visual for that in my head that I didn't even realize I had. But for me, when I picture like the spirit of like a place or the spirit of land, it was the waving on the wall, but like, it's like a waves that run, like colorful waves that run through everything, and it's like a pulse, right? That's kind
Mm-hmm.
of how I see it. It's like this this pulse of that divine energy that runs through everything. And also I think something that friends of mine often talk about is also understanding the history of the place that you're on, and maybe the traditional custodians of that land. And
Yes.
because sometimes that definitely spirits of people can be attached to a place. And definitely on the mountain here where I live, it was a traditional women's birthing mountain. um and so there's definitely a lot of local talk about how it favors women and doesn't always love men being here. But then also that this was a very sacred place and it wasn't a place where people lived. So generally, I think, locals always talk about how if the mountain doesn't want you here, the mountain's going to make sure you leave. And whether that's in the form of natural disaster or, something happening with your home, or some wildlife affecting you in some way. And it says they say that the mountain tests everybody to see if you are gonna, I guess, worthy of staying, worthy of being here. And I've definitely experienced my own tests since being here, but I know, like, I have a good relationship with the land and I understand a bit of the history. And then I've seen people who haven't and have been actively, I guess, against that, and they no longer live here and their businesses are closed. And it's amazing to see how that works. There was a local witch who had a shop up here, and she used to say, I get to control the indigenous elders and like their spirits, and I get to decide who leaves and goes. And she's no longer here. So I just think that that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And so, like, it definitely, I've seen it with my own eyes, kind of how that can affect people in unexpected ways. And the importance of going that extra mile to kind of understand where that land came from. As you said, like even with the river, like, or the stream, people built a house on that. And like, of course that's going to block energy, that's going to make things hard for the land. And water and currency, it's all flow, right? And so we're interrupting a flow. It's like meridians in the body. So yeah, that picture of, like, all these waves running through the land, through my house and through the walls, and like that's how I visualize that, if it's helpful for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I like that. That's a very good visual.
And so, if you could give people a piece of advice also, because, you've talked about leaving offerings.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's offerings with the spirits of place, which can be
Yep.
food, they can be,
Mm-hmm.
jewels, they can be, you could even pick out bits from nature, go foraging.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
can be so many different ways you can leave. It can definitely be water. There's so many different ways you can leave offerings. It doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be something that you can't get rid of, or it's just, it's
Yeah.
acknowledgement. And ultimately, I think everyone wants to be seen, right? Everybody wants to feel seen, and that is, ultimately that's what it is, right? Is, you're seeing the spirits that live in your home, um acknowledging their presence, as you said. But also, I think with leaving offerings, you can do that with ancestors too, which is also a huge part of your practice, is working with that, with your ancestors, your ancestral heritage. So could you give people a bit of advice about reconnecting with their ancestors?
Yes, and I think this also applies to the land part of it too. Is to listen, because in some ways that's the best offering that we can do, because we're always like putting stuff out, like I'm going to give this food, I'm going to give this thing, I'm going to give this, and
Mm,
in a way that's great, but it's also like one side communication if you're not receptive to what is coming back at you and actually honoring that So like sometimes the land is going to say no. You're going to say, I want to build, a barn here or whatever. Can I do that? No. And you're going to have to decide for yourself, like, am I still going to build the barn here? Personal choice. But I think listening, and also, with the ancestors, is listening, because it really is a conversation. They have so much to teach us. They have so much wisdom that they want to pass down and give to us. And we have to listen to what they're saying, because sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you don't really want to listen to that, because it means that you have to maybe change your mind about something that you feel really strongly about, or you might have to act differently towards a person in your family that you have a hard relationship with, or you have to do something for yourself, take care of yourself in a different way that maybe you're not used to, or feel like you don't want to, or you don't have the time to do. But I think the best way is just to set time aside to listen and to see what comes back, and to be open to it coming through in like a lot of different ways. It could come through, in dreams. It could come through in intuition. You could have like a random memory about something. A lot of times for me, especially, it happens through synchronicities. So I'll be like having a question and wanting to know, and like a song will come that has like the exact answer for me. Like I've listened to the song 1,000 times, but that particular day, the lyrics were like meant for that moment in time to like reveal this answer or this message that my ancestors want to give. Or like, I'll see an animal come over and over again, or something keeps repeating itself, or like happens at the right exact moment. And then you just figure out what that means. So just being open to see, and maybe it's not going to happen right away either. It's not like you give the offering and you say, hey, I need help with this issue. Can you help me? And like 10 minutes later, it's going to happen, or a day later, it's going to happen. It might take a week, because everything happens in the right time. So also just being, I guess, open to the fact that it's not going to happen on our timeline either. And to trust in the perfect timing of things happening.
And it is that reciprocal relationship. And I think, there's one resource that people don't want to give these days, and it is the best offering you could probably ever give. And it costs you, well, people might argue this, but really it costs you very little financially, and that is your time. And it's something that in an instant gratification culture, we aren't used to giving anymore. We are so used to getting things quickly, doing things quickly, rushing through our lives. But there is no substitution for giving your time and having presence of mind to be able to form that relationship, because it's kind of like building a friendship with somebody new, or a romantic relationship with somebody new. You're not going to be successful in that relationship if you're going, I've got 15 minutes for a coffee. Are you good? Yeah, sweet. Okay, like espresso shot. Off I go. Also, could you like watch my kids for me next Wednesday? It's just not going to work like that. We have to build that relationship, and actually take aside our time, which I think, and it's for me too, like in a spiritual from a spiritual perspective, that can feel difficult, because we're going, well, what am I doing it for? Like, I've got actual things to do. I have to do my laundry, and I have to feed my family and cook dinner, and I've got other magical practices I'm working on, and I've got, a business I'm trying to grow, and then what, you want me to set aside time to like, just sit, like, or light a candle, or really do some meditation, or just sit there and be bored for a second, which I have a complex relationship with that word, bored. But I've had to like kind of understand what people say when they mean that boredom is a good thing, because I'm kind of like, there's never an excuse to be bored, but my definition of bored is different to what other people's definition of bored is. Because like for me, cooking dinner is not boring, right? Like I'm like, oh, cook dinner. But taking those moments to really tune in and just listen. Yeah, just be there, be present. Don't put the earphones in every night when you're trying to cook, or put a show on, or just like have that time. Don't scroll on your phone on the toilet, like
Yeah. Yeah,
wherever it
for real.
is, like shower, don't have music playing, just like take time
Hmm.
without that external stimulation to
Right.
allow for those messages to come in, because if we're constantly being fed stuff all the time,
Yeah. And I
then
like the
it's
way that
hard
you're
for that.
presenting it too, which is like, it's not like you have to necessarily set special time aside to just like
Mm,
sit there in silence, but it requires like you, right, not receiving information from other sources in a moment. So it could be while you're cooking, it could be while you're in the shower, it could be,
mm,
while you're in the bathroom or whatever it is. So it's not like it's adding extra burden to your life necessarily. Like, okay, now I got to find like time by myself to sit. No, it's just like, how can you carve those spaces out where you're not just receiving?
stimulus, yeah,
Yeah,
information all
yeah,
the time.
exactly.
Leave
Yeah.
space for the wisdom. Let go of the information for a second, because there's that hierarchy. I don't know if you've ever seen it, about like information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, or something. And it's about
Mm,
we can receive information, we can read a book, we can have this conversation and learn tips. But then how do we take that to a place of actually processing it, integrating it,
yeah,
understanding it, and having it turn into wisdom that we can carry with us and impart on future generations? So, like,
yes.
tuning out that noise and allowing space. And I've always loved that. I've talked about it on the podcast before. Like, for me, my favorite form of meditation is sweeping,
Mm,
or cleaning something, because it's a time, like I used to always volunteer to do the sweeping at work, because I knew when I got home I'd have stuff to deal with, and I knew when I was actively working during the day I had a lot of stuff going on, but I could take that time where I could be the person who swept the store and just be in my, like, go into my inner world and have time to process and to receive messages and to communicate if I want to. And my body was doing work, but that's that moving meditation, and my
yes.
mind was allowed to just wander, and that
Hmm.
that was really potent time for me. So there's lots of ways people can do it, but there is no substitution for kind of tuning out that noise. Sometimes we just can't multitask all of the time.
No, definitely.
And so, are there any particular hopes that I know, really the crux of it was you're looking for people to seek that reconnection with that world around them. But
Yeah.
was there if you could give one thing that you want people to really focus on after reading Witches Brews, what would it be?
Um, just that sense of knowing, like the quiet, little quiet confidence that they're not learning something new, they're remembering something that we all have access to. So it's not like mastering a new skill, right? Again, taking time to learn what this plant is and identify it. It's just like waking up this little hum underneath the surface and just allowing it to rise. Because really, the way I wrote the book is as a companion to people's own journeys and unfolding, and just hopefully a reminder that they know that they're not alone in their longing that they have for connection and meaning and for something deeper, and that the plants and the ancestors and the hearth and the home are with us. It's, they're all part of this together, and so people just are not alone. um
Mm, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it doesn't need to be complicated, and that's what's great about it. Is it's not. I think overwhelm is so common, and again, the internet does not help with that. But
No.
also, like, even going to a naturopathic session, I used to know when people had been to see the naturopath, because they walked into our store just dazed, like you could just see them panicking inside, going, my whole world has just been flipped upside down. I've got a list of things I can't eat, no list of things I can eat, and I'm confused, and I've just found out I got things wrong with me. And like, we can just remove that, and Witches Brews is so beautiful for that. It's like a really gentle holding of your hand as you walk through this. and start to, relearn some of these things that, again, we have that inner knowing that we've forgotten. And it's just, it doesn't need to be scary and it doesn't need to be complicated. It's actually a really beautiful, and it's a blessing to be able to do it, right? Like, as you said, that gratitude piece, really, this is all just a gratitude practice, ultimately. Being able to understand where we came from, have an idea of what we could be like moving forward if we, bring these practices back into our lives, and just have it be gentle, loving, and expansive in a good way. So, thank you for writing it. I absolutely, again, love the book, and I'm so excited for people to read it. So if people want to find the book and find kind of, some of your other offerings, what do you do and how can they reach you?
Okay, so my website, of course, is like I guess, sort of the hub to go check out all the offerings that I have. I also have like a pretty growing right now, crazily, Patreon, that people have been signing up to, because I have all different levels, but also a free level that has like a lot of stuff every month, because every month I give sort of monthly resources of different types, whether it's writings that I've done, podcasts, meditations, rituals, recipes. I mean, there's a lot. And a lot of it is free, so that you can check out what I do without any commitment, But if you want to go deeper, there's always like different levels where you can get access to other things that help you kind of go deeper into it. And people seem to be liking that now, because accessibility is very, very important to me. I want to make sure that people who, jive with what I'm doing, who are getting something out of what I'm doing, have access to not just, little crumbs that then is like, okay, now you have to get the rest, you have to buy this thing. It's like, I give things that are full things, recipes, articles, essays, podcasts, all that stuff. And then if you want more, you can also go that route. So I would say, I'm sure that my website, it does link to the Patreon, but Patreon is kind of its own thing
I think
too.
it does.
So,
yeah. And your Instagram is Jenn with 2 N's, Jenn Campus _author.
_author. Yeah.
And I'll obviously put all of your details in the show notes as well. But I can't encourage people enough to go and check out what you have to offer, because you have more resources than anyone I've ever known. And it's incredible. I don't know when you find time to do it. But it's not just like little stuff either. You really put a lot into every resource, which, as a Capricorn, I really appreciate, because I like all the information all the time. Like, I'm like, give it to me. I want it to be meaty. Whereas people always tell me my blog posts are too long. And I'm like, but I just need it all. So I really do appreciate that. And you have other books too. And I saw actually today on your Instagram, you reshared somebody's story that it was a beautiful red hardcover book about Christmas.
A guide to celebrating the 12 days of Yule. Yes.
Yeah. So kind of what books do you have? You got that guide, and people can access that, I'm assuming?
Yes. Yeah.
That's very timely.
I have it in like 3 different versions. You can get it digitally. You can get it in hardcover. Not that version, because that was a Kickstarter thing that we did last year. But you can still get it in hardcover and softcover. I have, of course, Witches Brews. I actually have a cookbook that I wrote in like 2015, I want to say. So this was like very early because before I was sort of doing the work that I do now, I was involved in the food space. So I was doing recipe creations. I was a food blogger. I had like a whole thing going on with that, which is why food still features very prominently in the work that I do. So that was sort of like a bridge. That book that I wrote was sort of a bridge between that life and this life. So take it, some of the stuff is like a little bit not quite as deep as where I've gone to now. But there's a lot of good recipes in there. It's seasonal recipes. They're gluten-free just because that's what they are, but naturally so, not like with special ingredients or anything.
Yeah.
Very seasonal. So it's called Love in Every Bite. Again, because like we were talking about before, you can really taste the love that people
Mm-hmm.
put into their food. And that was kind of the inspiration for that book, is sort of the energetics of food and cooking. So that's also available, I think, digital and also soft cover. And then I have like monthly seasonal guides that are all digital that you can get, that talk about the history, the folklore of every month, and with activities and recipes and short, small rituals to go along with that. So there's just a lot of
You do a
stuff.
lot. And also, just the last thing I'll say about that is you do a lot of stuff that is suitable for families. And I know that we have a lot of families listening, or parents listening, who are looking for ways. And that's something we focused on in our first chat together, about how we can incorporate that into a family life as well, rather than just as an individual. But, obviously, we're kind of more focused on the hearth as a concept in this discussion. But, if you are that person who's looking for ways to work with kind of old ways, traditions with children and within a family dynamic, your work is great for that. But thank you again, Jen, so much for talking with us all today. And I'm so excited to release this. I know everybody's going to love it. And again, I'll link Witches Brews. You should all go out and read it. The way that she writes is just gorgeous, and
you get a free sample if you sign up for my newsletter. There's a free sample of the book. So if you're not sure, you're like, I don't know if I want to do this, go check it out. Sign up for the mailing list so you can get the free sample, and you can go from there.
You can get inspired, get addicted, and you'll never stop reading Jen's book.
I hope. Thanks, Hannah.
Jen, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
Anytime. Thanks to all the listeners.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Your support means the world to me, and if you have a free moment and would like to leave a review, a comment, or a rating on your platform of choice, that would go a long way towards helping me to grow the podcast and reach more people. If you aren't already subscribed, check out my Substack newsletter. Over there, I share lots of free resources, as well as an option to join as a paid subscriber, which is another beautiful way you can support my work. May what you've heard today guide you in living a little more slowly and a little more connected.